high performance in poker is oftentimes not even super related to poker. It's related to the things around poker. What I found was pretty shocking and pretty appalling. There were just massive punts pretty much everywhere. Love to have winning players at No Limit Hold'em, at PLO, live poker, and tournaments. Basically venture out into all the various games and formats of poker. Subscribe now to a front row seat for expert hand analysis and world-class cash game strategy.
So I thought it might be helpful to start out with a little bit of background on the Wolves CFP program, in a little bit more of a general sense. When did you decide to start the CFP?
So I decided to start the CFP in 2021. And this was after making some courses and, being a longtime private coach. I had the idea to start, and I believe that the first official month was January of 2022, which means, we've been in operation for a couple of years.
What was like the impetus for starting a CFP, pivoting away from being a private coach, selling courses? I remember actually a conversation that we had really, really early on before Wolves even existed. And I remember one of the concerns that you brought up was about just you were friends with a lot of other CFP runners, and you'd heard about, how thin some of the margins can be and how little room for error there is in running a CFP. And it seems like a much more risky endeavor than what you'd been doing before Wolves. What drove you to kind of make the leap or take the risk?
I think that at my heart, I'm a coach who enjoys watching my players make progress. And that's the thing that's always appealed to me. Running the business hasn't really appealed to me. I've learned how to build a business. I've learned how to sell courses. I've learned how to sell, write sales pages, do marketing, all of these sort of things. But the big driver for me has always been coaching and helping other players live the poker dream, right? That I've been very blessed to live for my entire adult life. So, the CFP was kind of an extension of that. It was like, okay, so maybe I can pull back, focus all of my energy and effort into coaching and pay my way through life that way instead of, writing daily newsletters and, doing the whole business marketing side of things. That was like the thing that really, really appealed to me. And, to answer your question, like the projected margins were quite low, but I did think that if, I could train up some superstars, that it would make financial sense as well as, being fulfilling for my soul.
Was there something kind of about yourself, about your own coaching that gave you confidence that like, hey, you could actually do better than these margins, or you could do better than the CFP runners that you knew and be more successful than they are? Because like you said, it on the outside before you got started, everything seemed really, really thin, right?
Yeah, I mean, I had some studs, so I had some success. You were one of the studs that, when we started working together, you were playing 100 no limit within 4 months. You were playing 1K no limit. So like you had found success relatively quickly. So like I knew that it could be done. But I will say that like it was a massive problem and a massive challenge that quite frankly terrified me. And I didn't know what the end result was going to be, right? Like, I don't think there's any way that I could have known what would happen, whether it would be successful or whether it would fail. But I think that once I made the decision that like, okay, I'm going to go for this CFP thing, then it was just invest all of my energy into doing whatever I could to make sure that it had the best chance of being successful. And then hopefully, the financial side would take care of itself, assuming that I could fulfill my end of the bargain as a coach and, help these human beings achieve the kind of success that they were looking for and that I was looking for them to have.
So kind of tell me about the early days a little bit. Is that did things just work out like that instantly, or what was what worked out well early on? What was unexpected that happened that you couldn't have foreseen?
Yeah, the first month was terrible. I will say, the strats were not fully built out at that point in time. And although I had made, courses using data analysis, I had never tried to like conquer the entire game tree, right? Which is what Wolves it is. It's just a comprehensive guide, a comprehensive map with regular one-to-one coaching that will help you beat online poker. So I'd never undertaken that kind of challenge before, and I didn't really know what would happen. And the first month was, terrible. We lost, and it wasn't even close. Everybody was the players that I had collected and that had signed a contract. They were all ready to go, right? Like they were all just chomping at the bit, ready to get this thing rolling. I was ready to get this thing rolling, right? I think as a human being, this is kind of like how I am. I want to start like when I've got the itch, when I've got the urge, I want to strike while the iron's hot. And so we struck that December, and we struck out. It was not great. And the major problem being that the players hadn't taken time to, we just didn't have the time for the players to learn the strats, for the players to get adequate coaching before the contract began. And then they all just started piling in volume simultaneously, which just led to subpar play. And it just wasn't great. And so that was the first kind of unforeseen challenge that came up was, I have to give like lots of time for the onboarding phase before the player begins their contract. And, then it was ironing out the kinks in the coaching methodology, ironing out the kinks in the strategies, and just having them evolve over time. I think is something that, is still a challenge to this day. But it was a real annoying, difficult journey to begin with for the first while, the first long while.
How are you feeling as this, like, I'm sure anytime someone starts an endeavor or something like that, you come in with super high hopes and like, we're just going to hit the ground running. We're going to start like, how are you feeling after, the first few months of kind of this like sobering reality of like, oh shit, this is going to be
scared.
Tough.
Yeah, I was scared. I was nervous. This, from my perspective, it turned into a personal challenge that essentially would reveal my levels of coaching to myself, right? Which is the scariest kind of challenge, where you don't know whether you're going to succeed. You don't know whether you're going to fail, but one way or the other, you're going to learn something about yourself. And if this project that I invested my heart and soul into failed, not only, would I kind of look like a dummy publicly, where, I've been advertising, I've been talking about this program, and this is like, selling it as like, this is everything that I have to give as a coach. If I give everything that I have to give and it doesn't work out, and I'm not fulfilling my end of the bargain, then that's not good. That would not be a good reflection of myself, my coaching abilities. And so I was nervous. I was scared. I had no data that said we're going to be successful, that this is going to work out, that we're going to churn out killers, that, collectively we're going to have a high win rate. There was no precedent. So it was extremely scary. And essentially the only thing that I knew to do was to double down on the energy that I was spending in building out the program. And, that's pretty much where I was at. And in my mind, I feel like I still am at today.
When did things start kind of, when did the switch flip? Or I guess you're saying you're still sort of in that mindset today, but when did things start smoothing out, I guess? And what would you attribute like the, things starting to work out phase? Like what allowed things to, be better? What improved your outlook on the health of the CFP?
I don't know. Results are nice, right? When collectively the program is putting together really positive data sets that are signaling that the methodology and everything's going well. I think that's the thing. That's the only thing that can measure the success or failure of a CFP is, what does the last 500,000 hand data set say? What does the last million hand data set say, right? Like, are my players playing the stakes that I would like them to? Do I have players playing high stakes? Do I have players who are progressing up through the stakes over time, right? These are all the metrics that I think really matter as it relates to success or failure of a CFP. And when I say that I'm in the same spot that I am now that I was then, it's that I'm aware that things could go south, things could degrade, right? Like if because poker evolves over time, um, or maybe say I lose energy to do all the things that I did a few years ago, right? Like I run out of steam. I think that the program could start suffering and it could be detrimental to everybody's growth. So that's kind of the mindset that I just kind of keep in my head pretty much every single day is like, how do we stay ahead of the curve? How do we continue improving? How do we continue upgrading so that we win more, so that we have higher win rates, so that we got guys that are playing high stakes live, we got guys that are playing high stakes online, and that sort of thing.
Do you remember, like, I don't know, in terms of time, in terms of like months or I guess years, like how long did it take to sort of get over the initial kind of fear, like the concerns of like, oh wow, this, the first few months like did not work out. I think like one period of time that I will never forget in the early days of the Wolves program was Backbreaker Month, which happened sometime in the summer of 2021, and just like a couple coaching sessions where I remember just a lot of like frustrated, angry Brad saying like, "Hey man, like if you guys are gonna make mistakes like this, there's almost nothing there's no amount of coaching that I can help you with." Was that a turning point, or maybe you can just talk about Backbreaker Month a little bit more in depth because that's a period of the Wolves program that I think I will never forget.
Yeah, so Backbreaker Month, it was on the heels of like to describe kind of like what my life was like then. It was daily building out strategies. It was daily learning about being a better coach. It was doing everything in my power to provide the players with the best coaching that I'm capable of as a human. And we just were struggling, quite frankly. It's like month in, month out, we're just struggling. And so I decided like, okay, I'm going to look at some individual hands in the data set. And what I found was pretty shocking and pretty appalling. There were just massive punts pretty much everywhere. It wasn't, they weren't hard to find. And it quickly became like when I zoomed in to the micro and got really close, it was like, oh, well, I can see why we're not winning. We're doing these just terrible things that are outside of my coaching methodology. They're outside of like how we train, outside of strategies. And yeah, like that moment was critical for me because it made me realize that it wasn't just my responsibility as to whether or not the group was successful or not. It was the players' responsibility as well. And so that was me essentially saying, hey guys, you can have all the coaching in the world. You can have the best coach. We can have the best strategies. But if you're going to make these kind of mistakes, it's never going to work. Like, I'm just spinning my wheels. I'm wasting my time. You're wasting your time. And you should find a new dream. And that was, yeah, it was a pivotal moment. It was a very fiery few weeks and probably pretty uncomfortable. To be fair, though, I actually had the plan for Backbreaker Week, and I gave myself 3 or 4 days to recover from my initial anger and frustration that came when I first was looking through the hands, which was probably good because we may not have a CFP if we would have had a coaching session directly following me looking at everything. But yeah, that was kind of a big moment in that I realized that, I accept responsibility for everything that's within my control. But on the other side of the coin, the players have to accept responsibility for playing well. They have to accept responsibility for making good decisions. And, I'm not gonna feel bad about our results. I'm not gonna let my identity be wrapped up in our results as a group if we're playing like dog shit.
So is that sort of kind of all it took to eliminate these backbreakers? I also just want to mention that I really like how backbreakers sort of become this like internal term in our CFP, and there's we've had like funny experiences of new guys signing contracts, new guys coming into the CFP, and one of the first questions they ask is like, what is a backbreaker exactly, and us having to explain that. But is that was that pep talk or those pep talks through Backbreaker Week and kind of you kind of filtering through the data and just letting everyone know, like, you guys got to take this, as seriously as I'm taking it. And, it's obvious that you guys aren't. Like, is that all it took to flip the switch, or is there anything
I
else that you would
wish.
attribute to? Yeah.
I wish. It'd be nice, right? I think that anybody that's listening that's, set their New Year's resolutions before can realize that you can rally everybody together and get the troops ready to go and ready to take care of business over, a short time frame. But over time, the troops start wandering around again and playing in the dirt, and you got to rally them pretty regularly. So, yeah, like you set your own goals, you're ready to go for the new year, and then everything falls apart after 2 or 3 weeks, right? I think that that's just a part of the maybe it's a part of humanity and our journeys, but I think that you know anybody that's listening that's a professional poker player, you're probably familiar with this feeling of like investing a lot of energy into getting better and then trailing off. Investing a lot of energy into your health and then trailing off over time, right? You can't keep up that same motivation. You can't keep up that same energy to keep up with it. So, Backbreaker Week, like everything else, immediate results. It gave Wolves an immediate boost in win rate. However, over time, people got a little comfortable and Backbreaker started, filtering back through. And so, yeah, to me, it's like weeding the garden, right? It's a thing that will happen forever. But as long as you stay on top of it and you get out in front of it and you don't let your garden just go crazy for 6 months straight, yeah, good things tend to happen.
What other type of coaching wisdoms like that have you learned as you've gained experience like running the CFP? Like I think like weeding the garden is a really good way of kind of putting that. And it's I don't know if that's something that you were expecting to do before you started the CFP, if that's a part of coaching that you knew would have to happen regularly. But is there anything else like that you've learned over the last few years that's like, hey, this is a really important part of coaching. It's a necessity to running a CFP successfully and being an impactful coach.
Yeah, I mean, like letting players learn on their own, letting players think for themselves and make decisions that they're responsible for. I think that's, been a big lesson in Wolves. Just helping them develop their ability to think critically, to think logically, to think rationally, make good decisions, I think has been very critical. How I communicate with players is very critical. Understanding like what individuals' love languages are, right? Like how to communicate effectively with them. I've made terrible mistakes in just not being able to reach a player from their paradigm, not being able to connect with them in the way that they feel connected, which has been definite learning experiences. But yeah, I think that
how much of that is on the player and how much of that is on you? Like how much of that is like, hey, like I'm a good fit for this CFP. I'm a good fit to be one of Brad Wilson's students. And how much of that is you saying like, hey, I need to be more more malleable in terms of the way that I'm thinking about, poker paradigms, and I need to allow for different types of students or students that learn differently. Like what's like sort of the balance there?
So I think again, I'm gonna take responsibility for as much as I can possibly take responsibility for. That's always the first thing. And then secondly, I think that if it's possible to reach somebody on their paradigm, then I want to be able to find it, right? If there's a path to victory, then I really want to explore every single option until I realize that there is no path to victory, right? That all paths lead to defeat, which again has unfortunately happened within the program, which again is not something that I really expected. I don't know what I expected. Everybody to just kind of fall in line and do what they're told and that sort of thing. But yeah, it just doesn't always work out that way. Everybody to understand and see poker the same way that I see poker, or to see poker in a way that I understand, that I can make sense of, so that I can help them. But yeah, it's not always the case. And if you can't reach a player, then I think that one lesson that I've learned is you just have to let the player go. And there's really no other option. If the players don't fully buy into the coaching methodology, if they don't fully buy into the training, and if they never will, and I can't figure out a path to victory, then yeah, it's just we got to part ways. But I would say that I don't have the perspective of the player to look at, right? That's sort of the the problem that I have with answering the question is I don't have the perspective of the player, so I don't know what they could specifically do in order to fully buy in. And I think a lot of times the things that stop them from buying in are, previous trust issues, are some kind of past trauma with their emotions that they can't reconcile. Maybe sometimes, I'm just an asshole, which is certainly the case, right? And they don't want to work hard to reconcile it, right? I think all of those things are possibilities.
Yeah, I think just the one thing that I would add too is just the difference between learning poker from a data-driven standpoint, and the difference between that and sort of learning from maybe like a more solver or GTO framework. Like, do you think that that's also something that causes or sort of requires a different level of buy-in or a level of flexibility, mental flexibility?
I think that if you come in with the paradigm that you want to win, you will do whatever it takes to win. Whether that's through learning a data-driven methodology, whether it's through learning a solver-driven methodology, like, what are you willing to do in order to have success over the long run playing this game? I think that I could coach players from either perspective, right? I'm studied enough to understand how solvers work. I'm studied enough to understand what goes into a solver output, and I'm also studied enough to understand, how data works. But realistically speaking, we play games against human beings. It's my strategy versus your strategy. And anybody that doesn't understand that, like, I need to deploy a strategy that is superior to my opponent over time, and that's what gets me the money. If they just want to deploy a strategy that they pick from somewhere and use it, and doesn't really matter if they're winning or if their strategy is superior or not, or they're thinking in depth, then so be it. Probably not going to be super successful. So, like, for me, it doesn't really matter where the person comes from, I don't think. What really matters is that their goal is to win and do what it takes to win and do what it takes to understand this game at the appropriate depth. And if they can do that, then I think it's good.
Would you say that that's just far and away the most important quality for a good candidate for applying to Wolves, or just one of the best, being a good candidate for being a successful high stakes reg that's trying to move up the stakes? Or what other than the desire to, or the willingness to do whatever it takes to win, like what other things could you point to and say, like, hey, this is we've noticed that this is really important in terms of being successful, and maybe being successful in this CFP specifically?
So successful in this CFP, I mean, you have to be coachable. You have to listen, right? You have to be respectful of the coach's time and energy that they're investing into you. I think that is by far the major factor that will dictate whether or not a player is successful in the program. Is, do they fully buy in or do they not? And you can't fake it. When players have fully bought in, they found lots of success. And when players have halfway bought in, they haven't found much success. And that's that's just what I found within a relatively small data set of players who have previously been Wolves. Is like the players that just, yeah, they trust their instructors, they trust their mentors, they trust their guides, and then they build off of what we learned together, instead of kind of not trusting, not buying into like 66% or half of the methodology, or 30% of the strats, right? Like, I'm just saying arbitrary numbers right now, but like, essentially, like, when you fully buy in, good things happen. And this traces all the way back to you, right? When you took preflop bootcamp originally, there was a typo in the preflop grids where It was, I believe, button versus cutoff. When the cutoff 4 bets, we were doing a coaching session one time, and you asked me, you said, hey, you know what the low equity 5-bet jam is? And I said, no, what is it, John?
I think you said there aren't any.
Oh, I said there aren't any. There aren't any. And you said it's king queen off. And I thought, what? What do you mean king queen off?
You're sticking in 100 big blinds with king queen off pre-flop? Is that what you've been telling? Was that what you're telling me?
That doesn't make sense. That can't be right. And you pulled up pre-flop boot camp, the first iteration, and you showed me king queen off was a jam in the grids, right? And it was a typo. Like, the hilarious thing is that was a typo that just, like, I didn't even see. And you had been 5-bet jamming king queen off pre for like the last 4 months straight, right?
Never got called, by the
time.
way. Yeah, I was 5-0, which is
Yeah, it never. So maybe there's something to it. I don't know. Like, maybe everybody that's listening right now needs a 5-bet jam king queen off facing a cutoff 4-bet when they're on the button. But I think that's the level of buy-in that really breeds success and really breeds exponential growth as it relates to the student and coach relationship. When I'm sure you didn't want to jam king queen off whenever that scenario cropped up, but you did, right? Because you had fully bought in. And so that's just one anecdotal example of, the power of fully buying in.
Yeah, I remember going 5. I remember thinking that it was really strange, and then just going 5-0, and then my next feeling was just like incredible insecurity about like, wow, like I still don't understand pre-flop to the point where like I can't see why this is the jam. Like this, it must have to do something with like about blockers or something like that, and I'm just not understanding it. But I guess I'll just keep doing it because it's in the course, and it's been working, and so yeah, I think that's.
Wish I could say I was secretly a genius that found a glitch in the matrix, but no, I just clicked the wrong button once.
Okay, so then other than, or I guess in addition to having the players that do buy in, seeing the success of some of these guys that I know that you've coached some players up from like 100 NL to. We now have guys who are playing 2K NL online. We have players who are playing, 25, 50 live on stream games. What's been some of the most rewarding parts, maybe the most unexpected rewarding parts of running the CFP and being the leader of the Wolves program?
I mean, the friendships, the relationships. I don't know if it was completely unexpected, but it's the most rewarding part is, just watching players find success and get to do the thing that they're passionate about, get to pursue a hobby, get to pursue a life that they're really passionate about, and being able to facilitate the poker dream. That's far and away the best part for me. It's not money. It's not anything else. It's just having friendships and relationships with these human beings that I think are incredible, that I root for, that, we're in this together every single day, and them finding success. I mean, I don't know what else could I ask for?
What are some parts of your relationships that you have with these players that aren't poker related, that aren't necessarily like student coach relationship? Like what's come out of, Wolves that's been extra? Or I guess, how does it happen? Where does it happen? Is it, I assume you're not talking about, one-on-one coaching sessions or something like that.
Yeah. It's generally speaking, it happens during Wolf retreats when we spend lots of time in close proximity to each other. I can think back to running the Elites program, back probably 3 or 4 years ago now. That was a month-long performance program that CPG offered. And with that program, I learned that high performance in poker is oftentimes not even super related to poker. It's related to the things around poker. There's, Doyle famously said in one of his books that after his first daughter passed away, he couldn't win for 2 years. He just lost playing poker for 2 years. He wasn't there emotionally. He wasn't there mentally. He couldn't be because he was in mourning, the death of his first child, which, yeah, I think is understandable. And oftentimes, like in the elite performance months, the problems that people were encountering that led to bad play at the tables had to do with, you know, their personal relationships, had to do with things they were dealing with on a daily basis. So being able to have those kinds of discussions, being able to set a plan in place so that they can resolve those types of issues, I think that also leads to deepening, stronger relationships.
Yeah, yeah. I totally agree with you about the retreat parts. I've only been on one I've only been able to make one Wolves retreat so far, but yeah, can't say enough about how great of an experience it is just to again like spend quality time with, the guys that, we're mostly only seeing on Zoom or seeing virtually, and yeah, getting to get to know them as people more so than just poker players. Any
I mean,
other
every single player in the program has people that rely on them, family, friends, pets, spouses, children. So it's really, yeah, it's a really high stress, high pressure thing as to whether or not they succeed as poker players. And so, yeah, it's really good getting to know people, and it's really good carving our way through some of those issues.
Before we get into the lightning round to, finish off this discussion, is there any topic that you want to touch on Wolves or CFP running in general?
I don't think so. It's much harder than I thought, and that's coming from someone who expected it to be exceedingly difficult, who, mapped out all the various potential failure points beforehand, who has access to folks like Nick Howard, who can, kind of give me his thoughts and his experiences, and let me know like what he did wrong in the early days of Poker Detox. So I had a lot of resources that I could look at and talk to, and basically try to front run all the potential problems. And it was still exponentially more difficult than I ever imagined it would be. So that's really all that I have to say about the beginning days and even today of the Wolves CFP. Right, I think that it's an ongoing challenge, and the day that it stops becoming a challenge is probably the day that I hire somebody to take my place, because I really enjoy taking on these gigantic challenges and testing myself to see whether or not whether or not it can be pulled off. And yeah.
I think that'll actually tie in really nicely with the first lightning round question. If you could have the Wolves program be exactly where you wanted it to be 5 years from now, what would it look like?
Man, 5 years.
5 years.
Years ago,
2029.
chasing poker greatness wasn't even a thing. It was not even a thought. The short answer is I don't know. I would love to have winning players at live poker. I would love to have winning players at No Limit Hold'em, at PLO, and tournaments. Actually, like I would love to basically venture out into all the various games and formats of poker and keep growing and keep building while maintaining, our core of human beings that I just love working with on a day in and day out basis. I think that would be the ideal, would just be keep expanding into different arenas. And then after that, I honestly don't know. Like, again, when it becomes easy, when it becomes not a challenge, when I don't have to be there on a daily basis, then I think that I probably won't be there, and I'll be handing it off to somebody else to steward Wolves and guide it into the future, who, yeah, just has the energy and the motivation and that I trust.
What is one piece of poker advice that you hear when you're sitting at a live cash game table, when you're watching other poker coaches make training content, when you watch streamers? What's one piece of poker advice that you hear regularly that you wholeheartedly disagree with?
I think the biggest piece of coaching that I disagree with is just whenever anyone is dogmatic about anything, whether that be dogmatic about solvers, whether it be dogmatic about analyzing data, whether it be dogmatic about coaching methodology, just whenever you believe that everything is black and white, or whenever a coach believes that something is black and white, like this is the way you find success, this is the way you find failure. I really disagree with that. I think that you just have to be more flexible than that, and you have to be willing to admit when you're wrong. You have to be willing to admit that a different path might be superior than the one that you may have crafted your identity onto, and then just be willing to change. So, yeah, I think like lack of adaptability, I guess, is kind of what I'm talking about. Just when coaches are not adaptable, when they are dogmatic in their own beliefs and not willing to change, I think that is just the biggest. It's the biggest disservice that you can give to your players and the folks that you're responsible for.
Last lightning round question. If you could wave a magic wand and change one thing about poker, what would it be?
I think that I would change how certain everybody is about everything all the time, or how seemingly certain people are about everything. That, you know, poker's doomed. There's no future in online poker. The poker dream is dead. That, you know, poker coaching is a scam. That CFPs are a scam, right? That like, oh, we got to change the language around CFPs because like they're just a scam. I think like just in general, everybody's certainty, like, oh, this is the right way to play this hand because I looked it up in a solver, right? I think that that's the thing that I would change, is just like, let's let everybody have more introspection. Let's let everybody try to seek out the truth before they espouse their flaming hot take onto the universe. So I think that's the thing that I would change.
Yeah.
It'd be, just less certainty.
Seems to go hand in hand with your answer to the second lightning round question for sure. And also just kind of, you know, some of the things we were talking about earlier on in this discussion about, you know, being willing to buy into strategies or methodologies that, you know, might not have been where you come from, or might not be sort of the standard way to play poker. Last but not least, if you're interested in applying to the Wolf CFP, or you want to learn more about the CFP, where do we find?
Go to chasingpokergreatness.com and click on the Wolf CFP. Fair warning though, you know, we're scaling back on our acceptance, and if you know you feel like you don't meet the criteria and the stuff that we've discussed in today's episode, then, you know, probably don't apply, right? If you're not willing to buy in, if you're not passionate about poker becoming a much bigger part of your life, if you're not passionate about realizing your poker dream, then don't apply to Wolves. But if you're a winning player already and you believe that with coaching, you could be not just a winner, but move up stakes much more quickly. You can double your win rate. You can be one of the killers, one of the best players, one of the alphas in the games. Then I think apply to Wolves and we can figure it out. And yeah, I think that's pretty much my spiel for anybody that may be on the fence or may be considering it. Actually, if you're on the fence, don't do it. Like, again, need fully bought in human beings that desperately want to chase poker greatness and desperately want to see just how big, just how successful they can be.
Sounds good. Thanks for your time.
Pleasure, man. What was your key takeaway from today's episode? Drop a comment down below and let us know.
Are you a lone wolf searching for the ultimate pack? The CPG Wolf program is a close-knit brotherhood hell-bent on one thing only: chasing poker greatness. Powered by bleeding-edge wolf strats and led by Coach Brad and his lieutenants, CPG Wolves are systematically prepared for almost any spot they'll encounter on the green felt. If you want to plug into an elite team and have a step-by-step game plan to realize your full poker potential, you can apply at cpgwolves.com. Space is limited, and the pack is only as strong as its weakest member. So only the hungriest, grittiest, and most driven will be accepted into the program. Applications are open at cpgwolves.com.